everyone. Thank you so much for being here this morning. I'm so excited that you are here and that we get to spend this time together this morning. My name is Teresa Bunner. Currently, I have the privilege of serving in the role as Director for Student Engagement in the Office of Equity Affairs in Wake County Public School System in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm excited to talk to you today about student voices and empowering our students through writing. My friend Julia Torres, some of you may know, she and I conceived this session together, and then she had an amazing opportunity to go and be at the Quelle conference this weekend. And so I'm flying solo without her, and I'm going to be missing her. So I asked her to share some quotes and some ideas to challenge my thinking and our thinking. So you're going to hear Julia's voice in the presentation today. So I'm really excited. At least she's here in that way and in spirit. So just some logistics, and Brittany, if we can switch to the next slide. Right there, there's a hashtag, the Ed Collab Gathering, and then a space and #3. If you'll use that this morning around this session, then I'll be kind of following the Twitter feed. Brittany will be following it too. And for those of you that aren't aware, I want to say hi and give a shout out to Brittany, who is our tech assistant with the Ed Collab this morning. Yay, Brittany, thank you so much for your help. So if you use that hashtag, then I'll see your tweets, and Brittany will see those tweets, and we will make sure as much as possible that I address questions or comments or things that you want to share. So I just want to talk for a minute. We're going to skip that slide. Thanks so much, Brittany. I just want to talk for a minute about the idea of authentic writing and authentic audiences. So if we can go to the next slide. So when we think about that, a lot of times the conversation in the education world around authentic will talk about the idea of, can we have our students write for real world purposes and real world audiences? Apparently really easy for me to say. And those are great, and we definitely want that. I want to add another layer to that this morning in the next slide, and I want to talk about the idea that, oops, go back one, thanks so much, that it's also about authentic writing is asset-based, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but it's based on what our students bring and valuing that in our classroom. Authentic writing values the self as the creator. So I have value, I have something to say. I can use my writing to think, to understand, and it values myself as a consumer. If you are a writer yourself, which I hope that you are in some ways, then you know that a lot of times writing is our thinking. It's our way to kind of bring clarity around something that we're thinking or that we are believing. And so that's authentic as well. And authentic writing and audiences are created in a community of writers. And I just wanted to share with you this morning a piece by a student in a program and some work that I do that we'll talk a little bit more about. But this is from Ziona, a writer's perspective. Hide the soles of your hands in your oversized sweater. Your eccrine glands will secrete an odorless fluid known as sweat, and your lips will tremble much to your chagrin. This is your story to share with the world. Your papers that lack the MLA format the county has beaten you over your head with. Words that build his or her character, inspired by the nights you spent late in your bed drawing their extinct layouts. You put your pen on foreign paper and meet every blue line, filling the spaces with cities and castles and schools, a house. Your only motivation was to get the song no one has sung out, that story that pushes you to move your pencil along the paper and not stop. You didn't slow down to edit or worry about spelling. You only wanted to reel in the movie playing in your head, to evoke an image or a mood. Your only intention is to write the episodes that you can never catch up to. You want the people to see how you feel, to see the characters you dream of every night that only exist to you. You live to write a story you can only know, a story you can only write. And I think Ziona's words are a powerful charge to us about what writing can and should be for our students. And so I want to go to the next slide, and my friend Julia is going to challenge us with something to think about. So Julia says, and her Twitter handle is down there, and my Twitter handle was on the beginning session or the beginning slide, so it's at reading RDNG teach. So we'd love to hear from you if you want to tweet out what we are thinking, what we're sharing. Ask questions, push back, invite, be a part of the conversation. So Julia says effective literacy instruction is like any relationship. You need to have 4 legs to support the table: trust, shared experiences, shared values, goals, and humility. And so I want to talk a little bit about a program that I've developed in collaboration with others in 2 different districts now. If we go to the next slide, our hashtag this summer, if you want to follow us, will be hashtag SWI19. So we have the Summer Writing Institute. I'm not in the classroom anymore, but I still believe passionately in the power of literacy in the lives of our students. And so each summer, we have students come together for around 3 weeks. We meet on a college campus, and we bring in locally and nationally owned writers, authors, performers. This summer, we're having an illustrator, Raul III, come. So I'm very excited about expanding our view of literacy this summer. And so every summer, these writers remind me of the things I learned in my own classroom about creating authentic writing experiences and authentic audiences for my students. And so their words are going to resonate and weave through what we are talking about. So when we're talking about creating space for authentic writing, through my time in the classroom, for 20 years, I was a classroom teacher, and through feedback from our writers in the summer, these tenets arise again and again, and those are going to be on the next slide. These are the things that our writers tell us that they want, that they need, that they value, that help to create spaces where they can be authentic. And we're going to break each of these down a little bit in the next few minutes. So they talk about the need for it being a community. And for me, it's a community of writers, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Asset-based. And I have an amazing quote from a student around one of our writers around that. They value the mentor texts and the writers that we bring in. Time. So many of them talk about the power behind just having time to write. Authentic feedback. They like that there's feedback in multiple ways, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And carry through. They want, if we're going to say you should write for authentic purposes and authentic audiences, they want to know that we're actually going to create the space and allow that to happen. And so we're going to break each of those down a little more. And so I've got another great thought from Julia that I want to share with you on the next slide. And so I'm going to give you a minute, because I think you're all smart folks. I'm going to give you a minute to just read that quote to yourself. And so I think in any work that we do with our young people, creating community is critical. Our students are not going to take academic risks in spaces that don't feel safe. And writing is an incredible risk. If you think about it, think about us. If I asked you right now to write something and then to tweet it out, think about how that would feel. I mean, I know I would, my my palms would probably get a little sweaty and I'd be a little hesitant, like, but what if what I wrote isn't good enough? And so writing, when we're asking our students to write and to share that and to share their voice, who they are on the page, and then to put that out into our community, that's a big risk. And often we talk about developing relationships and we think about that in the context of teacher to student, but we also have to develop those relationships from student to student. So in our summer writing, it's about developing us as a community of writers. I want our writers to know and applaud and support and push each other just as much, if not more, than I want it to be me or even our visiting writers who come. And so I love that Julia challenged us in that thought to think about this idea of co-creation. So let's talk a little bit about how that happens. So we're intentional in what we do in our summer writing. And so I think it's really important to always start with the personal and the local. Who am I? So that I understand who I am and how I have value in this space. So some of the ways we do that are by having our students start with some autobiographical writing. We've used Sandra Cisneros' names piece from House on Mango Street, and they write about their own name. We've done 6-word memoirs. We've done This I Believe statements and then paragraphs and then into larger pieces of writing if they want. We've done, community builders like Two Truths and a Lie, where I get to be creative about, what I share about myself. That's a writing prompt. Can our students craft and our writers craft tweets? We've had them do it in more creative ways through me boxes or collages, but we always start with, it's okay to recognize, to call on, and to draw on the power of who you are, because who you are has value in this space in our community of writers. And so I want you to think for a minute about what are some of your favorite activities, writing activities or prompts to use with students to really get them to think about who they are and to begin to put who they are into the classroom space. And if you are willing to take a risk, I'd love if you would tweet that out for us. So what do you do? What activities have you used to invite that personal, local, and immediate sharing for students? And so we also, if we're going to be a community, we have to be intentional about building community. Just because we're all sitting in a room together doesn't make us a community. And so we use some very specific things to develop that community. So we do group agreements, group norms. Maybe I'm sure you all do something like that in your classroom. For us, it starts as group agreements, but it turns into a pledge. So it starts something like, we the writers of the Summer Writing Institute. And we, often agree to support each other, to take risks, to allow all voices to be heard, or something like that. And that pledge hangs the whole time that we're together. And we go back to that and we recite it a few times as a community. And I have to thank Dr. Alfred Tatum, whose work inspired the Summer Writing Institute. If you're not familiar with his book, Reading for Their Life, I encourage you to pick that book up and to take a look. He talks about the reading and literacy lives of African American males, and I got to visit his Summer Literacy Institute that he does. And he calls his young men in the group the brother readers, and they have a pledge that they read and share with one another. And so that's where that came from. We create 10 things lists together, 10 things that, irritate us, 10 things that, we wish people understood about, teens. And so we do some of those collaboratively in order to build that community. We've done group storytelling. I love my colleague Alicia Cradle brought in just a myriad of props, and we put the kids into groups, and then each person had to grab something, and they had to create a story using those props. And so we did oral storytelling as a way to build community. We do partner introductions. So I'd love for you to think about a minute for a minute and share out, if you're willing, what are some of the things that you do to create community in your classroom where all of your students' voices together are collaboratively creating something? So I'm going to give you just a minute to think about that. And then the last category, if we can go to the next slide that we have, is once I know that I have value and that my voice has space, once we've built relationship and come together as a community and begin to learn to draw on each other, then we have a space in which hopefully our writers feel safe and comfortable putting their voice out into the community. And so rather than saying, okay, so now you're just going to share a whole piece at once, which can be daunting for some of our writers, especially if they don't feel yet like I am a writer. And so we use some different strategies. A Quaker read, if you're not familiar with that, I love in the Quaker community, they come together in meeting. And when they come together in community, they celebrate and honor that it's okay to have silence. And then in the Quaker community, in these meetings, what will happen is when someone feels called, they will just, they share something out. There's no judgment, there's no response necessarily to it. They're just there's this freedom to put that out into the community. And so we invite students to share a line that they've written, or even just a phrase or a paragraph or whatever it is. And we just sit quietly in community together. And as they feel called, they can share that out and put that out into the community. No judgment, no feedback. We're just putting it out into this space. We also have students use golden lines, and I'm sure many of you have done this or do something really familiar. So go back through, whatever drafts you have that day, whatever we've been working on, and find a golden line, something that you just, when you're reading back through, you're like, oh my gosh, I wrote this line. I am so proud of this line. I don't know where I'm going with it. I think maybe it could be something else. Where's the line that you just look and you're like, yes, that is a good piece of writing that I did today. And so we have them highlight that in yellow because it's a golden line. And then there's different ways that we can share those. We can go then into a community circle where we share it out. We might do a milling to music where we play some music. They get up. When they stop, they just read their golden line to someone else and then move on. And so that's just another great way to have them just share and put their voice out, but they don't have to present a whole piece yet. And so we also do author's chair. I love author's chair. So at the end of each session, we have our author's chair, and you can come up and you can share a whole piece, a part of a piece, and you get to tell us as a community, what is it that you're looking for from us? What feedback do you need around this particular piece? And it's so powerful to have our writers share, and then they're applauding each other, and they're saying, oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear more about that. You are going to keep working on that, right? Because I'm wondering what's next. And so it's just an amazing way to do that. And then we have partner feedback. So where can they just sit with a partner and talk to each other? And I will never, ever forget the summer that I had two young women who were there. And previously, in my previous district where I did summer writing, I was allowed to offer our summer writing as a way for students to regain credit. So both of these young women were there because they had failed English class. So in lieu of summer school, where they were going to sit in front of a computer, they were with me for the time. And I will never forget them partnering up for feedback. And one of the young ladies shared her piece, and the other young lady turned to her and said, well, now, what is it that you really want your reader to understand there? Because I think that's where you need to go. And just to hear her speaking like they were, writers, they are writers. She had that language, she had that ability, and she was coaching her peer in a way that so oftentimes we set up in our classroom that I, as the teacher, am the one who's supposed to create that. Let's see. I just want to make sure I'm seeing a couple things come up in the chat. Um, okay, I'm not seeing a question, so I just want to make sure that I'm hitting your questions if you have them. So all of this community building is intentional. It is there and it is centered around writing. It's not an either or. I don't have to build community, the first week of my classroom and now be like, oh, good, now I can get into this whole writing thing. And so I want to go on to another great thought from Julia. I'm going to give you a minute just to share that once again, because I think you're all capable of that. And I love what Julia challenges us with here. I love that she reminds us that yes, mentor texts are great. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, because I do believe in the power of mentor texts. And that's why we bring writers in who look like and who mirror the students who are in our program. And so but our students, our writers writing our mentor texts as well. And so how do we center our student writing? And I loved last summer, we had a writer who created a found poem, and she drew from lines from all of her fellow writers and wove them into this amazing piece where she connected to her own thoughts as well. And it was just such an incredibly powerful piece, and what an homage and tribute to her community of writers, that she said, I hear you, I see you, what you say has value. Another one of our writers mimicked the format of a piece that one of our writers had shared out into the community, and in her dedication gave credit to that in the book that we produce. And so I want to talk about this idea of asset-based instruction, and and the next slide kind of has that on there. And it's a reminder that asset-based, oh, not sure what happened to the D there. We're going to read it. We're reading it asset-based today. So it's what you know, not what you don't know. And so often I think we start from, we must teach our children this particular writing format structure they must know. And yes, there's some validity in those structures and knowing them, but how do we begin from and draw from a space of what they are already bringing in, because they bring so much to our schools and to our classrooms. And a perfect reminder for me of how we kind of stifle that for our students is the first year I did summer writing. It was short. It was only 4 days. It was kind of this last minute brainstorm that I had. Went to my boss, said, hey, I've got this wild idea. And he said, let's roll with it. And so I had 10 young people for 4 days. And I was feeling the crunch of time. There was so much in my head I had envisioned that I wanted them to do. And so we watched Sarah's Kay's piece, If I Should Have a Daughter. And we read Sandra Cisneros. And we, responded in different prompts and pulled out lines that we liked and did all of those things. And we had writer's notebooks. And at the end of the first day, we had like 45 minutes. And I said, okay, now it's your chance to write. So open up your writer's notebooks and now you get to write whatever you want. And these 10 faces looked back at me just like, no. And one of them said, no, really, what do you want us to write? And I was like, whatever you want. You can, this is yours. That's your writer's notebook. Go for it. And then still they just kind of sat there. So I had run off like an autobiographical poem frame just as because I'm an incredible over planner, as you're going to find out, because I've got a great 6 hours worth of stuff I want to talk to you about today that I'm going to try to cram into 45 minutes. And so I handed those out, and I handed out some extra kind of thinking prompts. And then, you know how you have one of those moments as a teacher, you're like, okay, something's happening. There's something in the air. And I looked around and there were 10 pens and pencils scribbling furiously on these two pieces of paper I had given them. Because what I had done is giving them writing in the way that they knew it. Here's a form. Here's the way you have to do it. Here's what you have to think about. And so I went home that night and I had to really deeply reflect and think about that. Like, I've contributed to that in my own classroom. And so I had a chat with them the next day about, I apologize that that's what we've reduced writing to for you. And I want you to understand this is writing in a different way than maybe you're used to. And so we shared several more mentor texts that next day, more prompts. And I was like, I was all prepared for how was I going to scaffold this? And we got to like the last hour, and one of the writers said, Ms. B, do you think we could just write now? And I was like, oh, yeah, let me get out of your way. And it was like, yes, yes, that's what we want from our students. That's what we want. We want to wean them off of that need for there's a right answer, and that right answer comes from me and what I tell you that should be, into can I have space and time for my voice? Great question. Do you have students create their own community agreements? Yes, 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 yes. Always. That pledge that we create as summer writers comes from them. What I do is I use that as a model for a writing piece. So I take all of their agreements and I write a rough draft of our pledge, and I bring it back and I put it up, and we talk about intent and word choice and flow. And so that's actually one of our very first collaborative writing pieces that we create. When I was in my own classroom, yes, the community agreements, and I'm gonna be honest with you, 28 years ago, when I walked into my first classroom, I didn't do that. I had Mrs. Bunner's syllabus with my rules and how we were going to operate together. And then I learned the power of inviting my students' voices into that. So that is one of the first writing pieces that we do together. So thank you so much, Catrice. I hope I said that right, for that great question. So we are, and so here's the power of asset-based. Yeah, go to that next slide, Brittany. This was the feedback from one of our summer writers last summer when we said, is there anything else you want to share or tell us? And she said, I love the way the teachers took the time to get to see our talents that we never knew were special. What power when we create space for our students to understand the assets that they already bring, and that they do have value, and they do have power, and they are special, and there is a place for them. So let's talk a little bit more about mentor texts. So I want to go to the next slide. So Julia reminded us to see our students writing, our writers writing, as mentor text. And for some of our students, they still struggle in some ways in seeing themselves as writers. And so I think it is also about showing them what is possible within themselves by sharing from writers who look like them, whose lives mirror them, who cross differences from them and open doors in ways that they hadn't thought about before. And so in our summer writing, we do that we're very lucky in that we get to actually bring those folks in. And there's my friend Julia there, right in the picture on the left there. And so it is amazing to watch a young woman or a young man have someone who looks like them, or has shared a life experience or story, or they have read their writing and made a connection, to have that person sit before them and say, you are a writer. What you have to say has value. To have them sit with them and give them feedback on their writing is just such an incredibly powerful, powerful thing. And so I am so lucky and blessed that we get to do that for our students. when our writers and our performers and our authors come in, they guide our writers through different activities. We fill in on the days when we don't have visiting artists and residents. But our writing prompts and activities are suggestions. They are never a mandate. And students are allowed to take that, our writers are allowed to take that and move that into any form. And one of the things we did last summer, as we were really thinking more deeply around this idea of how do we honor all voices, is to think, I think we build text sets when we're talking about what we want our students to read and to build knowledge around. But we also talked about the idea of text sets as a way to understand how you can explore, as a writer, topics across different genres. So if we can go to the next slide. Immigration was a big piece that, a big topic that had come up over and over and over with our writers. And so we looked at the topic of immigration from 3 different genre types. So we had an opinion piece, an op-ed piece. We looked at immigrants. We Get the Job Done from the Hamilton mixtape. And then we looked at an actual student piece of writing, which is the poem there. And we read or listened to or looked at the lyrics around each of those genres in each of those pieces. We talked about what each writer kind of understood or was sharing out around this idea of immigration. And then we talked about what you have to do as a writer in each of those genres. So, that goes back to, I've been in education for a bit, and so some of you may have too. So once upon a time, there was the raft, which was writing about different audiences and purpose. And so this is really about helping our students understand there's not one right way to write, but there are different purposes and different audiences for writing. So how can you develop fluidity and stamina with multiple types of writing so that when you want to put your voice out there, when you want to address something, when you want to use writing as power, then how do you choose a genre, a format, a platform, a way that's going to best convey your idea? And so we think about mentor texts and summer writing in that way as well. And then if we can go to the next slide, another great thought from Julia. And I love, Julia always keeps me humble, and I appreciate that about her. That humility works to unify people in so many different ways. One of the most powerful is that it allows both teachers and students to see the learning process as ongoing. In the spirit of Paulo Freire, when teachers become students and students see their teachers stretching themselves to learn, both are empowered because the end goal no longer becomes maintaining power position or status, but instead growth on every level. And so in summer writing, if we go to the next slide, I want to just share some pictures with you. When we invite those visiting authors, writers, and presenters to come in, those of us who are on the staff, just as I would in my classroom, if I had someone come in or I had one of my students lead, we sit and we become a part of the community and we read with our students. We share our writing with them. We put our writing up there for critique, just as we ask our students do. We step into the author's chair and we share, and we sit alongside and go on this journey with our writers together. And I think that there is great power in that. And our writers have said, you're not like my teacher. And I said, no, I'm not in this space. No, I get the privilege of not being that. But, even in my classroom, I want my students, when we're doing writing workshop, when we're working on pieces, I want them to understand that I don't have, the magic pen that marks all the errors and tells you how to make your writing perfect, that it's us together. and that I struggle with writing too. And I'm really honest with my students. I struggle with some of the more creative writing that our visiting artists and residents have us do, because that's not who I am. I'd much rather write a nonfiction piece, an opinion piece. That's where my comfort level lays. And so, I'm sitting right alongside our writers going, man, I'm really struggling to come up with this one. I don't know what to do here. What do you think? And so we model for them what we want them to do for each other as well. So I want to go to the next slide. So one of the big things that our writers, when they end their time with us, talk about is the whole idea of the power of just having time to write. And it's always interesting. So, at the beginning, we're a lot more scaffolded, and we always try to leave, a day at the end of the week. We're not bringing anyone in, or we don't have necessary things planned, but it's really about where do they want to go, what do they want to put out, and giving them space to write. And it is so amazing that to say, okay, we're going to have this block of an hour to write. I'll never forget where we meet on a college campus when we do this. And so one of the classrooms in the buildings that the students have said, can we just come have this building every year? There's a couple of lounge areas with comfortable chairs for the college students and all. And they have the freedom to, kind of go and sit in those lounge areas. They can stay, in the classroom that we have if they want to be closer to our home base. And so to say, okay, you have an hour of time, and then to go out at like 55 minutes, and they're just all engaged in what they're doing, either their notebooks or their laptops, and you go around and you start talking, and they're like, oh, Miss Bunner, just like, could we just have some more time, please? Really. And to have them saying, can we have more time for writing? I mean, what am I going to say? No. Yes, of course you can have more time writing. We just have to be ready to meet the bus so you can get home at the end of the day. And so there just is such power in creating that. And they, in their responses, have talked about how powerful that has been, that they think they are better writers and that they have developed more of a habit because we allowed them that time. And I think if writing is always homework or what you do outside of the classroom, then what message are we sending our students? Because what we prioritize in the time that we have them sends the message about what we value. So if I say that I value time to write, that I value the revision process, that I value feedback, that I value your voice on the page, then I have to create the time and the space for that. And then the next thing that they love, although they don't use this term, they don't say thank you for the authentic feedback. I'm just going to be honest with that. But they talked about the power of author's chair and sitting there in that author's chair. They talk about the power of having a quote unquote real writer. And that's Nonika Ramos. In the red there in that picture. And Nonika, the students just loved the 2 days that they had with Nonika in our Summer Writing Institute. And she, like so many of our visiting artists and residents, was so kind and sat and gave feedback to each of the students and just honored their voice. And then you see two of our writers right there sharing feedback with each other. And so this idea that when I'm stuck, I can turn to somebody and I say, hey, can you help me with this? Or if I'm stuck, I know there's going to be time at the author's chair and I can make a note to myself, I want to take this to the writing community. Or, hey, oh my gosh, a real writer told me that my voice has value. And so when we have when we have our students hand in a piece of writing and we just give them a grade and some, comments and we hand it back, that's not real. There's no opportunity in that real time moment unless we build it in for them to do anything with that feedback. We're hoping that they will remember that. So the next time they write, they will apply that. So authentic feedback is really about how do we create that space for real-time feedback and real-time opportunity to apply that feedback to my writing? And so, I want to really have us think about that. And so I want you to think for a moment, how do I offer space in my classroom for authentic feedback around writing? And if you have something great you do, or if you just have something you do you want to share out or a question around it, please go ahead and tweet that out. And then the last point that our writers share, and once again, I don't think they use this language, but the idea of carry through. If we want to talk about authentic audiences and authentic writing, then do we really carry through with that? And I just need to put a plug here because several of my author friends have shared this out. Let's not have our students write to authors and tell them that they have to get a response in order for them to get credit. That's authentic audience, but not really. So if we're going to say that we want you to write for an authentic audience, we value your voice, then where are the spaces and places we are creating for them to share that authentic writing with authentic audiences and to have the opportunity for feedback and sharing? And so one of the things we do, and publication day is always a big deal, is in our summer writing, we ask our summer writers to commit to giving us 2 pieces of publishable writing, and we publish those into a book, and they get copies of it for free, and they get to, after they walk out, say, I am a published writer. So there's and I get emails for weeks after summer writing, is our book ready? Is our book ready? Is our book ready? Because they want to know that we're going to carry through on that. They want to know that when we say we're going to take your work and we're going to publish it and we're going to share it with audiences in this way, they want to know that that's happening. Up there in the corner there is a picture. We added a summer writing slam. So our last evening of summer writing, we invite families and community. Last summer, we had over 80 people gather on a very hot summer evening to listen to our writers put their voices out into the world. So if we are truly talking about authentic audiences, then how do we carry through and how do we honor that commitment to our students? And so how do we create time for authentic feedback in our classrooms? Yes, please think about that. So we have just about 2-ish minutes left. Peer-to-peer feedback is so powerful. And like I said, that conversation with those 2 young ladies around writing, with them using the verbiage, they were writers. And the title of our book from last summer is I Am a Writer. That's a direct quote from one of our summer writers who ended our 3 weeks together and said, I am a writer. And isn't that really the power of what we want for our students? So if you want to quickly tweet out a question or a comment, you want to push back on anything, we have about 1.5 to 2 minutes left. And so I want to give you that space. The last slide, if you want to get in touch with me, has my Twitter handle, my email, and I do want to give a shameless plug. If you are going to NCTE in November in Baltimore, our summer writers got accepted to do a session. We are so excited. So we will be doing Writing Our Voices into the World, Reawakening Our Writing Selves. Our summer writers will be there to help you as a teacher discover, uncover, dust off your voice as a writer on Friday, November 22nd. So we would love to have you join us if you can. And if there are no questions, then I hope that you'll keep in touch through Twitter, through email. I'd love to hear about what you're doing in your classrooms. And, oop, you got it, Brittany?
Yes, thank you so much. That was great. So many great things to think about as we continue Writers Workshop in our own classrooms and beyond the classroom. So thank you so much. I hope that everybody will stay tuned to join us for the 12 p.m. sessions. You will see them up on the screen. Session number 5 will be Good Intentions Gone Bad. How well-intended teachers can destroy a love of reading. And then session number 6 will be Sparking Bottom-Up Cultural Change with the use of Google tools. Session number 7 will be Impeach the President's Dream, Dreamers Surviving Freedom Through Literacy, Culturally Relevant Teaching, and Social Justice in Action. And finally, number 8 at 12 will be Successful Integration of ELA and Social Studies using Texts Addressing Cultural Diversity. So thank you again to Teresa. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. And we hope to see you again at 12. All right. Bye, everyone.